Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Africa Thrive Live. My name is Naomi Kirungu. I'm here in Nairobi, Kenya, and I am your host today. Yeah. So I'd like to welcome everyone. I see people are joining us from Facebook. Welcome everyone from Facebook, YouTube, and also LinkedIn. Really glad to have you. I'm really excited about our conversation today. And can I just say how I've missed you all? Yeah, I have really missed you. Yeah, we did take a pause with Africa Thrive Live. I know we're doing that every week. And some of you were asking us, what happened, guys? We're not seeing you quite often, but we did take up a time to experiment a few things and also to just get feedback from you in terms of our community of entrepreneurs. What are the type of stuff you'd like to see? And we did really engage with our community, and we are really excited because now we are launching almost our 2.0 Africa Thrive Live edition. Yeah, really excited. So just as a heads up, our Africa Thrive Lives will now be happening monthly. We'll make them more curated, and also during the month, we'll also be having learning and networking sort of workshops, which are more of a formal sort of webinars. So we'll still keep Africa Thrive Live, but every month, and also have our 2.0 of boot camps, which is more interactive webinars. Yeah. So really excited and welcome all. So I have a surprise for you. I have our co-host. Yeah, she'll be having these conversations with me, and I want to introduce her. She's no stranger to you. Her name is Irene Okoye. So please help me welcome Irene to the session.
Hey, Naomi.
There you are.
Hi. Just like Naomi said, my name is Irene Okoye. I'm based in South Africa. And the cool thing about today is the fact that, like Naomi said, it's Africa Thrive Live 2.0. So we get to have Irene and Naomi in the same context. Really excited about that. The last time I had to host it was a little lonely being without Naomi here, since you guys know her as a familiar face. Yeah, so Naomi, really excited to host this with you.
Yeah, and you look really nice, Irene. And when I was hosting, when you were hosting last time, I tried to not get offended. Yeah. So I have, Yani, let's just say I felt bad, Irene. I'm putting it out there. I felt bad because, yeah, you said, oh, like my friend Naomi says, and then shortly later you said, no, not my friend, my colleague. So I was very offended that I was downgraded from friend, yeah, to colleague. So I felt bad, Irene. I thought we were friends, but I'm
what,
still.
Naomi? I'm gonna have to blame it on live streams. You never know what's gonna happen. You never know whether that's a blip or should I have said that. So blame it on live stream.
Okay, Irene. Yeah. So it's really glad. It's nice to see how everyone is chiming in from everywhere. I'd like to encourage you to go to the comment section and want to hear where you're from. What are you excited about today? And a big part of why we do these sessions is to get to network as entrepreneurs. So we want to know, what does your business do? Which country or where are you tuned in from this evening? And also, what are your expectations from today? So keep those coming. And as you do that, allow me to introduce AMI to you. So both Irene and I work together at AMI. So African Management Institute, in case you haven't interacted with us in the past, we exist to enable ambitious businesses from across Africa to thrive. And we do this through practical tools and training. And like I mentioned before, we did take at when COVID hit, we have been really, our backbone has been really to support as many entrepreneurs and SMEs as we can survive this crisis. And now we have resources that you can chime into that are available to you for free. So allow me to quickly take you through them so that you can just plug in and see the kind of support that is out there for you. Yeah. So we have our Rise meditation sessions, which are our weekly reflection and meditation sessions that are facilitated by our co-founder and resident psychologist, Jonathan Cook. So like I've said before, as entrepreneurs, we carry so many responsibilities, and these sessions are designed particularly for entrepreneurs, just to help you unpack and reflect. And they're available on our app. And also weekly, Jonathan meets with the community. So it's such a great place to just unpack more on the emotional, mental, and even spiritual part of running a business. Yeah. And then the second is our weekly newsletter. So we have a team that sits and we collect resources, funding opportunities, any relevant news out there for SMEs. We put it on our weekly newsletter that we circulate. So you could always sign up to be in our newsletter. Yeah. And then third, we have now our revamped, let's call them our revamped boot camps, or how we are engaging with you and through our learning and our tools. So we have monthly learning and networking events. Yeah. So we have, for instance, one that's coming up next week. Like you can see on your screen, the beautiful Regina. She'll be talking about how to promote your value and build business connections. But over and above that, guys, for the very first time, we're going to be having a speed networking event for entrepreneurs in our community. We have over 9,000 entrepreneurs in our community, and it will be the very first time where we just get to meet each other and network and see who's doing what in which part of this continent. So we are very excited about that happening next week. And last but not least, Irene, are these conversations that we have and will be having every month, Africa Thrive Live, where we have conversations with real entrepreneurs. And we come to network, to learn, and also be inspired. Yeah. So to plug into any of the things that I've mentioned, please go to our website. It will be displayed on your screen shortly. www.africanmanagers.org/together, and you'll get to just plug into any of those resources, guys, that are out there for free. Like I said, Irene, we exist to support entrepreneurs to navigate this season and also to grow. Yeah. So Irene, I don't know if we have any people writing on the comment on where they're tuned in from, where they're based. As you do that, Irene, maybe you could tell us a bit more about what we are talking about today.
Sure, excited to do that. I'm a storyteller and I love stories. So I thought about how to start today's session again, because I love thinking about creative ways of doing it. So I thought about a book, but yes, but no. So something that I've been watching is Netflix, like most people under lockdown. That's what we've been doing. Hopefully not most of our time, but at least you've had an opportunity to watch an episode or two. So Naomi, one of the things that I've been watching is Grace and Frankie. Now, the reason why I love this show is it's lighthearted, but it also talks about a friendship. Other than that, there's something super special about these two women who are aging together. So they keep finding issues in the aging process. So they'll either find, there is no accommodation for older people in a certain aspect. So for instance, it's a walking stick. They just don't want normal walking sticks. So they're looking for how to bedazzle them and to make them look pretty so that they are attractive. So they're always looking for interesting innovations to solve their own problems. So in the episode I've been watching, the last episode I actually watched was fantastic. So the reason that it was fantastic was the fact that they were looking for funders. So they came up with a way of helping Grace, who's a fictional character in the show. She was having issues standing up from the toilet sit. Yes, toilet sit. She was having an issue standing up because she's aging. And some of the complexities are sometimes you struggle with mundane things like that. So, Frankie helps her. They come up with this beautiful innovation. I think it's called a rise chair or rise up or something like that. So it's beautiful. It works. It solves the problem. But like most entrepreneurs, you come up with a great product. What do you have to do? You have to find somebody to invest in it. You need to find the money to make it a reality. So anyway, they start calling people. Some companies are like, we don't want to be associated with a product that's for older folks. And some say, it's not sexy enough as a product for our brand. So there's all these issues about funding. Nobody's interested in funding their business. Eventually, a contact of them says, one of their contacts says, why don't you guys go to Dragon's Den in America, Dragon's Den? So they're like, okay, cool. So they start working on their pitch. And they have this great story about how this revolutionary product is going to solve so many people's problem, which authentically it does. So they get one of their friends to listen to their pitch, which as entrepreneurs, we tend to do that. You get somebody to play the devil's advocate. So she keeps saying no. They go round one, no, it's not good enough. Round two, it's not good enough. They try gimmicks. Frankie's really good. If you watch the show, Frankie's really good at gimmicks. Nothing works. So eventually they give up and they're like, okay, what is wrong? What are we doing wrong? And for me, this is the crux of networking and building networks. So the devil's advocate friend says, everything that you're saying about this product is believable, but there's something that's missing. And that's the story. What is the why behind your story? Like Simon Sinek would say, why are you doing what you're doing? What is a personal story? You know, what inspired this? So Grace didn't want to share her story, but that was a breaking point of making this speech believable and authentic. And I believe that's what networks are supposed to be. You know, we've moved from the era where when I started my career, it was about the quantity of business cards that you have, not necessarily the quality of the conversations you've had or the connections. So you would leave a room with 200 business cards, but none of those people remember you. You didn't make an impression. It's very difficult to connect with 200 people. So the crux of the matter today is we need to connect more authentically, intentionally, in order to build just a connection. So share your story in a way that people believe it, and not just making up a story, because I believe most entrepreneurs will not just make up a story. There's actually the why behind what they're doing. And then, you know, through that story, build connections. However you do that, build those connections. And those connections, I believe, whether you're able to work with them directly or indirectly, somebody will remember something about you and they'll refer you to their connection. So from a connection, you're building a network. And from that network, you're building a community, which is basically an ecosystem of people solving each other's problems. So I believe that's really important to networking in our current era. However, those are just my thoughts. We also asked a couple of entrepreneurs to share what their journey has been, if they have any tricks and tips. So take a listen.
First thing is, when I know I have an upcoming event, I take some time off for myself. For instance, if it's in the evening, I'll be working in the morning and early afternoon, and then I will take a break for me to refresh my brain and do some research on who might be the partners coming over for this event, so I can know what to expect, where they work, what type of activities they do, and how we could potentially collaborate in it. At the same time, it is important to market your own company and your activities. So I spent some time checking again that key information, key data, so I can share them with this network.
So I would like to share some success stories, how I'm achieving or I'm doing good in networking. So as such, I have a base in Lagos, but I use several remote platforms to catch the new customer, to hunt the new market. So there are two ways. One is hunting new customer. So how to hunt? So I use LinkedIn platform by continuously engaging with the technical sessions to the surrounding areas, and I also engage in the large public platforms to connect and to gain the knowledge and to acquire that knowledge, seeking that knowledge and implementing that knowledge to the African territory.
Wow. Irene, I just love the analogy you used, and I love the fact that you went out there and got actual entrepreneurs to actually speak to us. And when you were just speaking and connecting that, how there was the old school of networking and building connections, and what's emerging now is quality over quantity. I really, really love that. You should be ashamed for not categorizing me as a friend, because you're so smart. Like, you have to be my friend, Irene. Yeah. But anyway, let me just give a shout out. I see. Yeah, I'm never killing that story, Irene, never. So I just see there are a few people who are letting us where they're tuned in, telling us where they're tuned in from. And the topic today, like Irene mentioned, we're talking about how do successful entrepreneurs build great business networks. And we have some guests lined up, really excited to have them. So Irene has given her comments. We have our community of entrepreneurs who've given us their comments. What do you think? Yeah, our audience, what do you think? Just write that in the comment section. How do you think these days, or how are you successfully making connections? And when we talk about networking, just to demystify it, it's not just to potential customers. It could even be your current customers or suppliers or possible financiers. So it's like your whole stakeholders. What do you think? How is the best way to sort of build this network? Because we think it's what will elevate your business. So just as a shout out, we have Olatunde, who's tuned in on YouTube. It's glad to have you from Nigeria. We have Namasiku on Facebook, joined us from Zambia. We have Noma. Irene, I should have just let it. I find it very hard to pronounce South African names. There it is. Irene, please read that one. Struggling to hear you, Irene. I don't know if it's on my end.
So like I said, in this live streams, anything could happen. So I was on mute the whole time. So I'll take that again. So good evening. It's Mbali Mwelase, a business development executive at Midget. So super cool to have you.
Yeah, and we have Catherine joining us on Facebook. She's an entrepreneur. She is in clean energy. So we're really excited to have you, Catherine. Called Clean Water with so great networking session. We're really, really excited to have you. We have Chris joining us on LinkedIn, tuned in from North Carolina in the US. He's also has a business, I believe, in South Africa. We have many people who've joined us, and we're really excited and would like to hear what you think, and also even as we bring in our guests, would love to read your comments and questions. So keep it coming. We'll make it as interactive as possible. Yeah. So Irene, I'd like us to go straight to it, and I'd like to bring in our guests today. But just to loop everyone in, like I mentioned before, today we have an amazing not panel, but we have two great guests who've joined us, and they founded an interesting business that they'll be telling us more about. And I'm particularly keen to know how they met, because it's quite interesting. They came from very diverse backgrounds, but they were brought together by a common vision. Yeah. So let's watch this video, and then we'll have our guests.
We're not the first company to make high-quality running shoes. To those who made it before us, we know it's not easy to stand out in a crowded market. But it's easy to see we're different. My name is Nava. I come from the home of running champions. And I'm the CEO of Enda. Oh, you thought we were one of those companies, huh? Or these guys? Nope. If great running was made in labs, Kenya would never be on the map. We work hand in hand with Kenyan runners. No gimmicks, just Kenyan-made shoes designed to help you get the most out of your training. That means light shoes tuned for faster workouts. More cushioned shoes for longer runs and consistency year after year, so you never have to worry about your favorite shoe getting ruined. There are a lot of theories on what makes a great running shoe. But no shoe will make you a better athlete unless you go out and use them. In Swahili, Enda means go, and our goal is to help you go. So wherever you are in this world, whatever goals you want to reach, Enda.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the co-founders of Enda, Navalayo, Osembo, and Weldon Kennedy. Yay! The emojis are right there, guys, so just use them as alternatives to hand claps. Hey, Navalayo, and hey, Weldon. Just before you guys introduce, Hi, just before you introduce yourselves, we're actually getting comments about the video on our Facebook. So Navalayo, in the video, you said that Enda is Swahili for go, but I think we have a couple of people here saying that Enda in their language means the same thing. So I think it's more of a Bantu African language. Yeah, so we have Tami saying in Shona, it means the same thing. It actually means go. We also have Emi, she says in Rwanda, Enda means take. Yeah, so it's actually someone that Kayondi from Zambia says in Zambia, Enda also means go. Yeah, so I think it's a very Pan-African name. Maybe you could both introduce yourselves to us and then introduce Enda. Navalayo, would you like to go first?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. So my name is Navalayo Osembo, co-founder CEO of Enda. And as mentioned before, Enda was founded with the vision of basically giving more, just looking at what more Kenya can benefit in the field of running. Weldon.
Sure, I'm Weldon Kennedy, the other co-founder of Enda. And as Nawa said, we came to this with a vision of social impact and of making a running company that is doing something completely different from what everyone else in the industry is doing something totally new. And it's been a fun journey so far.
Yeah, it's really great to have you, Weldon and Navalayo. To our audience, keep the comments and questions coming. We'll take them and make this as interactive as possible. We'll really make it more of a question and answer sort of session. I think my first question will be, how did the two of you meet? Sort of how did Enda come to being?
So it's a long story, but I'll cut to the chase. Basically, we met at an incubator. So I was there as part of a previous business I was doing. Initially, I wanted to start a tennis school because I figured when you look at if you follow tennis, you see that we don't have very many Africans on top ATP 100. And so I wanted to change that. And my idea was to start a tennis academy and to try have long-term talent to kind of develop that. For lots of reasons that didn't work out. But kind of looking at the lessons from that perspective and looking at the opportunity that sports offers, I was there talking about how much more there is to harness from the field of sports compared to what Kenya is right now. And so it so happened that Mr. Weldon Kennedy was in the audience, and it really resonated with him in terms of more of I really get what you're talking about. He'll talk about himself a little bit more. Maybe he has a different side of the story. But he has a background in social change. And I think that's one of the reasons that I felt like, okay, he really means what he's talking about and he really understands what I'm talking about. And from there, our conversation turned to the opportunity of Kenyan running and how that opportunity has very much just had latent and potential. It hasn't really been exploited to the core. And so in that conversation, we were like, yeah, why haven't Kenyan-made running shoes been made? You know, it sounds so obvious when you think about it. And we were like, we should make these shoes. And yeah, that's how we agreed. And we kind of met a couple of weeks later, drew the plan. And here we are now, many years later, having at least achieved part of the dream. We still have a lot to achieve, but at least we were able to get there.
Wow. Weldon, do you have anything to add about that? About how you met?
That's the story. I was in an audience of a pitch presentation and heard a problem statement that to my mind was very exciting. Right, that Kenya benefits not nearly enough from its sporting reputation. Right, that you compare the scale of the Kenyan sports brand with how much Kenya earns from that sports brand, how much the country benefits from it, and it doesn't make any sense. These two things are way out of balance. And I think normally when entrepreneurs talk about like a business idea, they talk about like a consumer facing problem, right? That, you know, the story of someone couldn't get up from a toilet. It's like someone has a problem, you make a thing, you sell it to them, it solves a problem. And like this is like, to me, I thought this was a much more interesting problem statement, right? That it's something is wrong with the world. How do you make a business to fix it, right? That it's not one person's problem. It's something's unjust. How do you create a business around that solves that injustice? And then, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we just started chatting, and yeah, here we are with a couple of years later selling a lot of shoes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. As I pull in some few audience questions, Irene, would you like to take a few?
Yeah, I actually just want to go back to how Weldon has told the whole story about you guys meeting. Weldon, I'm going to start with you by posing this question to you. So you've talked about the problem statement, but what else resonated with you with how Navalayo told her story or her pitch?
Yeah, I mean, really, that central problem statement was like the big thing for me. My background is as a runner, so I have to admit, like I was like personally I enjoy running, and so the story, like a tennis, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me. Like Kenya's famous for running, I enjoy running, and so I went right up and said, hey, let's talk about running, because it's definitely a thing that excites me. But like that central statement around. That Kenya should have, growth from sport. Like, to me, that made just so much sense. And it really did strike me as an injustice, right? Like, in a way that, like, imagine if, like, so Germany is famous for engineers, right? Like, everyone knows German engineering. But imagine if, like, Germany didn't make cars, right? Like, you'd be like, whoa, they're really not getting much out of this reputation that they have.
Yeah.
Or if, like, if Switzerland, like, that all the Swiss watches actually come from Hungary or something, right? You'd be like, we should just make these watches in Switzerland. They're famous for watches. But, and so it really just struck me as a fundamental injustice, and that Kenya's not bringing in, the true earnings in the running industry. And so I was like, okay, well, that was it. Like, I found that a very exciting problem statement.
Yeah. Awesome. Navalayo, so I've stalked you a little bit on social media to see how you tell your story and the story of Enda. So I watched you on the Lion's Den talking about pitching to this panel of investors. And I just wanted to find out from you, what is important to you and what is important for entrepreneurs when they're telling their story, when they're trying to convince potential buyers, potential investors? What is it, and what should be in the story that connects with people?
I think something that's important is belief in the story. So I think ultimately you are the vessel, or you are the person who's telling the story. And so there's much importance in you owning the story and believing in it, because at the end of the day, you are the only unique person who knows the story in the way that you know it. And so it would be a great injustice if you know that story so well, but when it comes to telling it, you mumble or you fumble or you do something like that. So I'd say really believing in the story is key in how you tell it. And I think one of the things I've learned, especially when you're talking to investors, it's really important to also recognize that it's a two-way street. And so in as much as you're telling the story, the other person is also expecting to hear something, because they are hearing your story for a purpose and a reason. And so is your storytelling meeting the reason that they are talking about? So if you're talking to an investor, for instance, it's very different from how you're talking to a customer. It's very different from how you're talking to your other peers. And so I think that's something that has to be really taken into account when you're telling that story. Yeah.
Yeah. So something, again, like I said, with stalking you, I also found out that you did not take the offer from the investors on Lion's Den, and you've done very well for yourself. So I just want to bring in the issue of funding, because a lot of entrepreneurs tune in and ask us questions around funding. And I've read a lot about how you guys have tried to fundraise in different ways, creative, I would say, for the African market, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are not really, and you said this very well, you stated it very well, and actually quoted, I want to quote it. You said, a lot of people have such great products, but they're afraid of putting themselves out there. I loved it. I loved that statement. But I just want to get into, how did you guys raise funding? How did you start? What was the process?
I'll talk about half of it, then Weldon can do like the other half. I'll basically just, when we started out initially, we did put in a little bit of our own money. And then obviously, when you're in an industry that has high capital expenditure, you quickly realize that there's much more required even to just get to the prototype level. And so the next thing we did was fundraise from our friends and family, kind of did a presentation for them. Here's what we are planning to do. Here's how much we need to get to this point. Will you help us do it? So not everybody was convinced, but we convinced some of them. And that basically helped us to get to the prototype level. And once we got to the prototype level, we realized, okay, to go to scale, we basically needed a lot more financing. And a lot of, if you're looking at traditional institutions, they usually ask for security, which we didn't have, So we basically had I would say, an opportunity and at the same time a problem, in the sense of we couldn't find money in the traditional sense, and therefore we had to come up with a creative way of doing it. But even as we came up with a creative way of fundraising, we realized it was an opportunity because it forced us to go out and ask, and asking people, especially for money, is not an easy job, but it came as a blessing in disguise because we were able to at least get money from in a way that allowed us to basically flexible funding through crowdfunding.
Well
done.
Yeah. So crowdfunding, for a company like us, is a really great option. And we kind of, I think, decided very early on that it was going to have to be the path that we were going to take because, an investor wants to see traction, right? They want to see, oh, okay, can you, do you have a real business, right? Do you have a product and can you sell that product? And so crowdfunding let us do that. In crowdfunding, we went to Kickstarter as a platform where people can essentially pre-order the product. So we essentially showed them our prototype shoes, told the story of what we were trying to do, and people could pre-order the product at that point. And by pre-ordering the product, that actually funded our first production run, and then also demonstrated that people wanted it, right? That people were willing to pay, full price for a pair of shoes and wait a year for them because the story was so strong. And so that really that helps kind of motivate other investors as well, because they say, oh, okay, actually there might be something here. No, crowdfunding is not for everyone, but yeah, for us, because we're pre-selling kind of a product with a really strong story behind it, it was a great choice.
I really love that, Weldon. And I'm going to bring in Naomi. I was just going to say something from what Weldon said. He talked about the story, the power of storytelling. And I really love that because I feel like that's what's missing in a lot of businesses and in a lot of entrepreneurial stories that you hear. Not stories, but entrepreneurship and businesses, essentially. The story, the why are you doing it? Why is it important? What problem is it solving in society? Naomi, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do. And before we jump to those questions, I want to take us back to the concept of crowdfunding. I know we talked about it, assuming people might know what crowdfunding is. So can we demystify that a little bit? Because we know financing, and just even within our community, financing and funding is such a big issue for entrepreneurs. So if you could help us demystify, Weldon, maybe what is crowdfunding if I've never heard of that before?
Sure. So, there's multiple types of crowdfunding. There's, you'll find it referred to, there's kind of equity crowdfunding where you have a bunch of small investors all pool together to make a big investment. That's one type. That's not what we did. What we did is what's called product-based crowdfunding, where we essentially show a prototype of a product and say, will you pre-order it? Someone pays in advance for the product, and then they follow along the creation story. So, they basically have signed there are different platforms to do this on. They're all, tech platforms to do this. We used one called Kickstarter. And so then people, once they've bought that shoe, essentially a year ahead of time, we then give them updates on how it's going. It's okay, we've cut the molds for the shoe. Okay, we've got the parts together. We've done our first trial assembly and it worked. So like all along the way, the person who's prepaid for the shoe, they're not just getting a shoe at the end of the year. They get this kind of creation story of their shoe coming into existence. And so, that's essentially the type of crowdfunding that we did.
Yeah, thanks for demystifying that, Weldon. So back to you, Navalayo. You've painted us a picture of how you met. Then you've also painted us a picture about how you are able to raise money. Let's talk about business growth, the marketing, the selling, the branding, that whole story of now actually you have the money. Now what? Yeah. So maybe you could paint us that journey for your business. How has that been? What did you learn being a product type of business? Yeah.
Wow, that's actually quite a bit. I was trying to process, okay, because ultimately I still feel like the learning process doesn't end, like I feel even today I was learning something new about the business. And so I think it's just something that goes on over and over. But I'd say our growth pretty much started from a product perspective was at the beginning, we just really wanted to have a prototype. Like that was what we were so much focused on. And then once we got to the prototype, we were like, okay, now we need to go into mass production. And that became like the core element of the business. And the beauty of crowdfunding is that we ended up actually having customers from 32 countries, like at the first instance. So usually a business would start local and go global. But for us, in our case, we ended up being global and then trying to figure out local, which I'd say gave us a first row seat in supply chain management, where we were just trying to, at that point, it was just Weldon and I, and you're like doing customer queries, you're doing the market, you're basically doing everything. And that's the point where we were like, okay, we definitely need help going forward to just help us manage a few things. And so from that point, you start seeing the growth of the business from a staffing perspective. So I'd say we have been growing based on, okay, let's focus on the next step. What's the next step? How do we get there? And then once you get there, the business itself will tell you like there's a glaring need that needs to be filled. And then from that perspective, we also recognized we needed more financing and had to be a little bit more creative. Like crowdfunding is great, but it got to a point we needed equity financing. And so we had to figure out, how do we get equity financing? How do we figure out debt? I mean, that's something we are still trying to figure out what's the best way to go about it. And so I'd say the business has kind of led the growth, but at the same time, we're also looking at, okay, for planning for the next 1 to 3 years ahead, how do we make sure that we're staying on top of the game? How do we make sure the business is sufficient? So once you get to that point, I think the business, if you're in tune with the business, you can kind of see where the places that need boosting are, and then you kind of just respond to that.
Yeah. Weldon, do you have anything to add when it comes to what you've learned around the operations of your business, marketing, brand building?
I mean, the list goes on forever. I mean, I think it's worth saying that neither Nava or I had ever made a running shoe before starting this business, right? We came into this with backgrounds. I mean, mine's in like communications and campaigns. Nava is trained as a lawyer and an accountant, right? Like we weren't running shoemakers nor running shoe marketers. And so literally everything. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer to that question, because everything, we had to learn it all.
Yeah, I was hoping to squeeze out an MBA out of the two of you, like in 15 seconds.
I wish. MBA of life, I'd say. Life teaches you the MBA.
Irene, before I loop it back to you, Navalayo, you mentioned something about supply chain. And we actually had, when we presented the two of you as our guests today, we got a few questions from our community. And I'd want to play a video of a question we got around navigating supply chain. So let's watch.
So in regarding to my networking situation, is that what we have found is that I have met up with Egyptian suppliers of paint, and what now has occurred is that the pricing model that they have come up with in terms of how much it would cost the paint to get it through to us here, as it comes to Durban. And I've also calculated the amount of value which is taking the paint from Durban to Pretoria. However, the problem comes now in terms of having to understand what are the customs requirements are. What are the hoops and skips and jumps that I need to do as a small entrepreneur to bring these paint coming through into South Africa as well? We do manufacturing, but we also would like to import some of that part just to give variety to our customer base. Yes, that's basically what I wanted to find out from you in terms of how does one, a small entrepreneur, a small business, come around and grapple around this forensic type of situation where customs needs to be addressed and taxes are involved, and who can we go to and who can we speak to in relation to that? Thank you.
Navalayo and Weldon, would you like to take that around tips around obstacles in supply chain, taxes, all that?
Yeah, I mean, supply chain is, from our experience, is still something we are learning about, right? As I mentioned before, when we started, we had the blessing of having customers from over 30 countries around the world, and it was intense. It was extremely overwhelming. And one of the things you learn is that each country, each jurisdiction has its own laws. They have their own what they consider customs, VAT. And at one particular point, I think, okay, from his perspective, he's serving the South African market. But then there's also the perspective of what if you have customers from other parts of the world. And I think one of the things, at least for us, we figured out that customs is always a touchy issue, especially if you're not sure. And rules and regulations change all the time. And so one of the things I think that we try to do is to be as transparent as possible with a customer, that if you're doing a direct-to-consumer business, you basically have the customer understand that in some cases you may have to pay a little bit extra in terms of customs. Sometimes it's easy to estimate, sometimes the estimate is a little bit way off. And what we try to do is at least provide the adequate documentation that is necessary to help the customer. When it comes to importing and you have customs duty and VAT, it's really hard to overcome that because it's a regulatory, it's a government requirement that you have to pay these taxes. And again, you also have to look at it from the government perspective. They're thinking if we don't have high taxes on imports, then we are kind of killing the local industry. So the two kind of counterbalance. And so in a case where you have very high customs and taxes, I'd say from an entrepreneurial perspective, try to cost that into the product so that at any one point you're not necessarily paying it out of pocket, but in a way it's considered as part of the product, so that when you're doing your margins, that cost is taken care of and it's not something that basically harms your personal finances. But at the same time, you also have to be aware of what your competition is offering, so that are you pricing yourself out? Could you find a cheaper supplier? So it's basically a game of numbers based on the market until you find that sweet spot that the customer is okay with the price, but at the same time, your product remains competitive.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Irene, as I get more audience questions, would you like to throw another one?
Yeah, of course. So from Navalayo or Weldon, I just want to find out what value would you acclaim to your local networks in Kenya and the networks out of Kenya, because I know you guys are you have footprints in most countries out of Africa. So and something that I was reading about is the fact that Navalayo has been very passionate about developing the local industry, working with the local industry to develop it, being from a supplier point of view. But I know that you're also looking at non-African countries as buyers, as customers. So if you could walk us through your networks locally and out of Africa, how has that worked for you? And what is the value? How much do you value those networks? Weldon or yeah. Navalayo? Navalayo, go for it.
Okay. That's good. I'd say there's a Swahili saying that says mtu ni watu, which translates really to a person is people, and so that's one thing I've learned in the business world, that your networks are pretty much everything. And in those moments, in the darkest moments of the business, people have stepped us to help us in ways that I cannot even describe how, and they didn't have to do it, but they did it. Mm. And so every time I feel like we have come across a barrier that we thought, oh, wow, this is it. And someone came through, and so one of the things I'd say is the networks have been incredibly immense. And one of the things I learned about crowdfunding is that you might have met someone years ago, But when you kind of reach out to them and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, they would still kind of step in. And so networks aren't just people that you're meeting now for the purpose of business, but they're also people that you've interacted with, people you've grown up with. And you'd find that those are the people who would basically say, I know that person and they're doing this and I really want to support them. And so I'd say business, what I've learned is that you basically need people, but conversely, it just means that you cannot be afraid to ask. You have to ask, because if you don't ask, I'm not going to know what your need is. And so locally, I'd say even just from making the shoes to figuring out different suppliers, to even figuring out what the name of our product is, it has been a communal process. And that's why the spirit of Harambee in Kenya, which means we all pull together, is so critical and core to our brand, because everything we have done, from fundraising to product naming to deciding what kind of product we want, has been a people-led process. And so I'd say networks are everything from my perspective. Weldon?
Yeah, no, that's 100% agree. I mean, I think the framing of the question, though, it's interesting because, like, you posed it as like a location of the networks, but really, I think I would reframe it as like, how do you, where do you see value in your network? And like, that's not where someone is. That's how they relate to you. Or, if someone is a friend and they want to buy your product, then that's how they relate to you, no matter where they are in the world, right? If they're if there's someone who used to work with someone who definitely should be an advisor to you, or recommend a production contact to you, doesn't matter where they are, right? That's just how they connect into your business. And like, so much of the world is super connected. I mean, look, how many different countries are on this call right now, on this video, right? Like, we're all together, and even though we can't, we're not flying around to see each other as much anymore. And so really, like, where people are going to be adding value and where you're going to be adding value to them, you don't know where that is. And so it's really just a question of, continuing to build relationships, continuing to seek to add value to others people's lives, because as you do that, they will add value to yours.
Oh, I really love that. Seek to add value to other people's lives. That's really awesome. Naomi?
Yeah, I would like us, Weldon, you sort of mentioned it, but I'd like us to talk about the present time that we are in, this COVID season, and how I'm just curious to see how this has impacted your business. What are you doing? But before we get there, we had one of our audience submit a video around how she's navigating. So I'd like to hear that as we play that, and then bring it back and hear how have you guys sort of coped in this season. So let's play this last video.
Hi, my name is Ivy Apia from Tiwajo Industries Limited, a natural cosmetic company based in Ghana. This COVID brought about a lot of shock and apprehension in our company. I actually started producing hand sanitizers, alcohol wraps, and alcohol wipes during the pandemic, and still doing that. But what the program really helped me to achieve was that I realized that my online presence was very low, and that my customers had to go to the shops in order to find my products. So I actually went on and joined an online company called Jumia, and actually I've started putting my products out there, because I've come to realize that in this COVID situation, the only way to go on is to also be online, so that customers can find you anywhere they want to go. And then it has really helped me in that angle. So now my products are on Jumia and it's selling well. Thank you very much.
And I just want to mention before you answer, Navalayo, that like my boss Tom said, that was not a product placement for Jumia. But two buzzwords that have been coming out in this season, and you hear it a lot with webinars and sort of everywhere, is pivoting and going online, pivoting, going online. Maybe Navalayo, you could speak to that. How is that looking for your business?
I'd say, so we are primarily an online direct consumer company. And so from the start, we have always been online. And so for us, it felt like we basically had built the infrastructure so that by the time COVID came, we were ready in a sort of way because we had been built to not basically have a physical contact with the customer. And so that was advantageous. So I'd say an online company is great because not only does it allow people to basically be customers anytime, you can still get orders during the night, but it also allows you a way to automate your business so that you can bring more efficiency. You don't necessarily have to do things manually. And I also feel like, I think in relation to COVID, definitely being online has helped from our perspective, but I think being online is just more than having a website. It's also trying to figure out the traffic, the conversion, which is the most important. It's not just, hey, you have a nice website, but it's also how do we make sure that people coming on your website convert? And so I think at this point, it's super critical. A lot of African businesses aren't online, and yet a lot of customers are online. If you look at the statistics of internet penetration, of the age of the consumer. And so it really pays to be online, to be on social media, and to invest in that infrastructure.
Yeah. Weldon, do you want to mention some of?
Yeah, I mean, like we've been pretty good during this whole time because we were a direct to consumer company, and when all the gyms closed, everyone took up running. So like actually we the only pivot we've had to make is expand our capacity to ship more shoes faster. So it's been interesting in that sense. I'd say like the thing to think about sorry, I missed her name, who sent in the video, references listing her products. Ivy she lists her products on an online marketplace, and that is actually something we don't do. We don't list our products in marketplaces online. We are our own destination website, and I think the difference there being, whether you're creating a brand or whether you're essentially selling commodity, right? So like hand sanitizer, I don't know about you, but like I'm 60% alcohol. Beyond that, I'm not really too fussed about the brand of my hand sanitizer, right? It's like it is a commodity in that sense. And so really, in a marketplace that it acts more like a supermarket, right? Where you kind of scan the shelves and you pick one. When you're much more focused on building a brand and creating that direct relationship with customers, being in those marketplaces can be actually detrimental because you'll lose on search engine traffic landing on your site, and you won't get that direct relationship with the customer. So we avoid those. We sell direct from our own website, and we want to like build that relationship so that people are hearing directly from us and they're having our customer service experience rather than a marketplace service experience. So I mean, it's just a different way of thinking about that same problem.
Something I can add about online sales is I think one of the things people need to also figure out is the mode of payment, because it's not just enough to be online. It's also how do you make it easier for your customers to pay for your product. And so I feel like that's something people really don't think about. Like, so I have a website, but then is it an M-Pesa till number or just a random personal number? Can people with credit and debit cards access it? Because you're thinking if you're making that investment, then you should at least try as much as possible to ensure that you have a system that allows people to pay in the different forms that they want to pay. So I feel like that's important to consider as well.
Yeah, I'd like to take some of the questions coming from the comments, and Irene, please feel free to become an expert in some of these questions. So any of you could take them. We have Kagai on YouTube who's asking, let me pull it up. I once had a women shoe business, realized that I used to end up remaining with dead stock or unsold shoes. Does Enda face the same challenges? Weldon, you are nodding. Maybe you could take that.
I mean, I'll tell a story about it, right? So when we did our first crowdfunding campaign, we offered our shoes in 3 colors: red, black, and green, right? The colors of the Kenyan flag with white soles on all of them to include the 4th color. The most popular color by a wide margin was green. Everyone wanted the green shoes. And so we were like, great, okay. So we sold out of green shoes. From the first production run, I didn't even get a pair of green shoes. Imagine, right? Like I couldn't get them. We sold them out. And so we said, okay, next time we're going to make more green shoes because everyone wants the green shoes. And then no one wanted any more green shoes. And so suddenly we had a bunch of green shoes because we made even more of them, and everyone then wanted red and black. It's not we're selling through them now, where we won't end up with dead stock, but we did end up with very skewed inventory where we ended up with a bunch of green shoes because our early customers wanted something flashy. They wanted something showy to say, hey, look, I got this cool thing. And then the customers who are coming to us later, they didn't want flashy and showy. They wanted utility, right? And like you want a more plain sneaker you can wear with more outfits. So they wanted black and white. So yeah, I mean, it can be a problem, and you have to be like, you know, I would say kind of ready to survive the fact that, especially when you're dealing with 27 different sizes of product and a bunch of different colors, that there will be some that sell a bit slower, and you have to build that into your business plan, that you're going to have some pieces of inventory that sit longer.
I'd also add, it's important to check your data, because ultimately you need to be checking like what your consumers are taking in more. And so if they like a particular style, try to kind of stock that more, but don't overdo it like we did. But I think one of the things I'd say for stocks is that it has to be data focused. It can't be, I feel customers like this. No, it just has to be numbers and numbers alone.
Wow, I like that. There's a question here from Maina Kibe on Facebook. Question is, where can I find Enda shoes in Nairobi? Navalayo?
www.endasportswear.com. Basically, endasportswear.com. If you check our website, you should be able to order, and we do delivery same day or next day. If you order now, you get it tomorrow.
Okay. JJ is asking on Facebook, maybe Irene, you could, sorry for throwing you under the bus, but his sentiments are, your conversation today is based on product. Now, how can one add value to service-based ideas, and how can you make, I guess, that to investors or funders? We are talking about to a product business. How can you make that more sound to investors? We are talking to a product-based business, so of course we are a bit product skewed to that sense. But does any of you want to chime in to the service component of it?
I mean, I would just, something that comes top of mind, I would say experiential, because service is about how someone experiences the service, whether it's software-based or whether it's professional-based. And so I would say, if I'm adding value, I would look at how do I enhance that experience. If it's something that customers check online, is it something that's easy to access? Is it on phone or mobile? Is it something that my website can load easily? If it's about ease of response, can I really quickly get back to my customers without necessarily having to do it manually? And so I'd say for service industry, since it's based on the user and how they receive the product, I would more focus on the customer experiential journey and see how to basically improve that journey.
Yeah, thanks for that. Irene, anything else to add around service-based businesses?
No, I totally agree with what Navalayo was talking about. I just wanted to go back to both of you and ask you a question, an idealistic question. If you were to dream Enda 5 years from now on, like, where would you want Enda to be? I know you've done this, probably. I'm just really interested in hearing, where do you see your brand in the next 5 years? Weldon or Navalayo? Let's go with Weldon. Let's go with Weldon, and then we'll come back to Navalayo.
Yeah. Sure.
In 5 years' time, you know, a major global brand in the athletic footwear space and you know, athleisure category more broadly. You know, something that has, in 5 years' time, hopefully will have dramatically changed the perception of a lot of consumers around the world in terms of what the potential of manufacturing, at least in Kenya and hopefully more broadly, is, right? That world-class products and world-class innovation comes from here.
Fantastic. Navalayo?
To add on to what he said, I think I also see, when you look at brands, like top popular brands in Africa, you'd notice that most of them are not really African brands. So you'd find that most of them are international brands, and most of them you'd say, other than the usual footwear companies, they're service companies, you know? And so like a top brand from Africa would be like MTN, for example. So it's not really consumer based. And so when we look at that, I think I'd want us to kind of be that company that is actually a product, consumer-based product company that's actually coming from the continent, because there aren't that many of them, if I remember well. And so kind of just not only coming from Africa, but also having that African pride, like that people in Africa feel like this is our brand and this is coming from us, kind of that ownership as well. And yeah, I'd say from a social impact perspective, we created Enda with the mission of benefiting, like increasing the amount that Kenya benefits. But then I think when you look at impact, it's more about creating jobs, caring for the environment. It's about being involved in our communities. And I'd like to see that we are a company that has set that standard for others, especially in Africa, to say that it doesn't have to be extraction all the time. It can actually be communities building each other and businesses coexisting in the same way. So I definitely want Enda to be that company that has shown this is possible and this is a sustainable path for us to do development.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to
Navalayo, sorry, Irene, go ahead.
So
Go
this
ahead,
happens. Like I said, it's live. Anything happens. So Naomi, go for it.
Okay. I was going to ask a follow-up question we have for Navalayo about your shoes, actually. So you've said we just go to our website, your website, but are they delivered anywhere? Because we have a very diverse audience. Are they delivered anywhere? And also, where do you sell your shoes most? I guess which is your biggest market, if you could answer that. But if I'm anywhere in Africa and I go to your website, can I get your shoes?
Yeah, so we deliver anywhere essentially, but one of the things to kind of highlight is the cost of duty is different. I mean, someone alluded to that, but we try to kind of give you an approximate on our website so that we save you any surprises. We at least try to do that. So, but we do definitely deliver in Kenya and around the world. Our key market currently is the US, but we are also servicing Kenya, and we also do ship to Europe and Australia.
Okay. And I guess this is just sort of like a build me up comment that we have here from Tawanda on Facebook. They feel inspired because they are currently working on a project and have displayed it with someone they met, but sharing the same passion in the business idea. So they're learning a lot, especially about holding on to the story and letting that drive the vision. Yeah. So I think just sort of like the two of you are inspiring people out here. And just to bring it back to the topic that we were talking about today around making authentic connections with people. Yeah. I guess even as we move towards your final thoughts, what would you say before we go to your final thoughts? What would you say is the one takeaway in terms of trying to build authentic connections that entrepreneurs can do? What's the one thing they can do?
I guess
anybody in the square can take it. Navalayo, let's go with you first.
I'd say I think personally, I don't see networking as here's someone I need to meet to get something out of them. And so I stopped that. I'm basically like, here's an interesting person in front of me. I have no idea who this person is. I have an opportunity to get to know them, their likes, their dislikes, their family and stuff like that. Like, of course, not prying questions, but I think that's how I approach it. Like, I want to meet you as the person. And if we become friends, awesome. If there's business out of it, more awesome. But I personally just say, talk to the person who is in front of you as the human being they are, because once it becomes a rat race of, I want this from you and I want this from you, I think for me that loses the authenticity. So I try to, we said quality over quantity, but I try to just get to know someone. Like, yeah, who are you? And that works for me usually, yeah.
Irene, Weldon?
Well, Weldon, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's exactly right. Right, like networking is about building connections of mutual value. Right, it's relationships, and so like I think, unfortunately, a lot of networking, or what people perceive themselves as networking, is like, and one of my biggest pet peeves, right, is if people send like a LinkedIn request to someone they don't know, and you get them, and you're like, but we're not adding. I can't do anything for you, and like, what, you know, because then I feel guilty. I can't do anything for you because I don't know you. And so like really that I think that it's got to be, anytime you're trying to make a connection, it's got to be about how, like, how am I bringing benefit to this person, and how are they bringing benefit to me? And we, you know, by doing that, you start to build a relationship. You start to actually, you know, make meaningful things happen. And so just making sure that, like, as you, if you have a problem that you need to solve in your business that requires finding new people, like we needed to find a designer, right? That you go about it purposefully, intentionally, with lots of conversations, you know, via connections, until you find someone who, you know, works, as the relationship works. You know, and it's not just about reaching out to the world and saying, hey, we need this. It's about, you know, working your way methodically through lots of different conversations, meeting lots of people, helping them solve their problems while they help you solve your problem.
Yeah, that's really good. And Keith Ferrazzi talks about it in his book, Never Eat Alone. So he talks about shared value, and always looking at people from a standpoint of, how can I add value to your life before you go into, this is what I actually want. And always asking, get to know people authentically, intentionally, just get to know them. And sometimes you may not even have anything in common, but they might have a connection that could be helpful to you. So building networks is really about, for me, it really is about quality and just connecting with people as they are, as humans. Let's connect on that level. Naomi? All right, Naomi, do you have any questions from the audience? All right, so let's go to your final thoughts, Navalayo. What is the one thing that you would like to leave the audience with tonight as we wind up?
I don't know. I've been thinking about how to make African businesses sustainable and grow. You know, like, how do we, because we usually have lots of brands kind of coming in, and we don't really have so many African brands going off the continent. And so for the entrepreneurs, I'd say,
yes, Irene,
really
I guess this always happens just when we are about to end, where we have a flood of questions. So I'll try and take a quick fire, if that's okay. So I'll just throw it at
I'll leave the final thoughts for later. Sure. Go for it.
Sorry, it's like we're having feedback and a lot of issues. Like I said, in my defense, it's live. Let me just see if Naomi is with us. Naomi, do you have any more questions before we go to the final thoughts? Navalayo, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and we'll take the questions afterwards. Sorry about that.
Okay, so yeah, basically one of the things that I think is important for entrepreneurs is to learn market diversification. Like, of course, kind of like understand your market, but try as much as possible, especially in this world that's super connected, and kind of, we talked about this going online, try to find a way in which you can target customers from different places. And so I would say, I mean, there's different approaches to different business, but from my experience, for businesses to be resilient, they have to kind of weather one market as the other market faces a downturn. And so I'd say diversity is very important in terms of just markets. And in terms of networking, I would say never be afraid to ask a question. You know, like as we say, there's no stupid question. And so a question always comes from a perspective of, I want to know more. And what I would say is ask. And sometimes I think that's the best way of networking, because it's based on, you want to know. You know, if you're seeking knowledge, you're more likely to ask follow-up questions that are more helpful to the networking relationship. And so my advice would be, ask away, whether something you think it's silly or not, like just keep asking. And that's the only way you will kind of be led to the people who are part of your tribe, if I could call it, or you lead to places where you find the answers that you're looking for. So just keep asking until you get to where you need to be.
Thank you so much. Ask and ask away. You're dealing with humans, so ask and ask away. Weldon, any thoughts before I go back to Naomi, who is back? Very excited that she's back. Before I take any final questions, I just want to go back to Weldon. Any thoughts? What would you like to leave entrepreneurs out there with?
Yeah, I mean, Nava kind of touched on it. It's a question of learning, right? The more questions you ask, the more you're learning. And it was interesting. Naomi is like, what have you learned? And the answer is like more than we could ever describe, right? And I think that actually ends up really touching very strongly on the question of networking. That one of the things that networking has done for us as we built Enda is it has been a huge learning process, that we talk to so many people who teach us so many things, and going in inquisitive, not just in terms of what that person has to teach you and what lesson you need to learn from it, but how that person learned it. Because then that gets you interested in them and it builds that relationship. So yeah, being curious, I guess, is a great way to think about how to get into networking and growing the number of meaningful relationships you have.
That's awesome. Thanks, Weldon. I'm just gonna loop in Naomi. Hopefully she's back. All right. So with that said, I think Naomi is having some technical challenges. With that said, I'd love to thank you guys, and I really believe in what you're doing. It's time that Africa had its own industry developed. It's time for African businesses to rise up and go authentically and build their networks and be as authentic as possible. So thank you guys for joining us. And so just before I close, I was thinking about, there's a book by, actually don't remember the author, but it's called Super Connectors. So it basically talks about finding the people that you want to connect with and learning as much as you can from them. So it's basically asking them questions like Weldon and Navalayo were talking about. Ask as much as you can. Find out how they've gone through their learning trajectory to where their businesses are. Ask as much as you can. Find out. Get the no's. It's okay to get the no's, but you can't not ask. Just before we close, I just wanted to just remind you about the upcoming networking session. It's an opportunity for entrepreneurs just like yours, just like you, to navigate, to learn how to navigate the challenges that all entrepreneurs face. It's an opportunity for you to interact with each other. This session is happening on the 27th. Like Naomi said, we have about 9,000 entrepreneurs in our database. So can you imagine what kind of magic can possibly come when we all pull together? So this is an awesome session. Don't miss it. It's an opportunity for you to also experience one of AMI's tools that we'll be introducing during the session. So we'll have Regina talk about her experience in networking, how she's built her own business. And then after that, you'll have an opportunity in breakout sessions to interact with each other. So this is an opportunity to put everything that we've spoken about into action, making those authentic connections. So we'll look forward to having you then. And I thank you so much for joining us. We're very sorry for the technical challenges, but like I said, in life, anything is possible. So thank you very much for joining us. Join us next time as we explore another aspect of networking. Thank you so much. I've been your host, Irene Okoye from South Africa. Thank you.